to me, it just seemed like a fundamental flaw. Here you have a team just blatantly and overtly violating the rule of the game because it's their only recourse to try to come back in the game.
Fred Richani, the Sports Courier Podcast. We have right here on the line a very special guest, a highly regarded guest. For those that don't know, the NBA All-Star Game has a bit of a twist this year. It's going to feature the Elam Ending as seen on the basketball tournament TBT, but there's a lot of intrigue. There's also a lot of questions, so I thought, why not bring a person that's an expert on the Elam Ending? Oh, wait, we did, and he's not only an expert, he is the inventor of the Elam Ending, Professor Nick Elam from Ball State University. Professor, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for hopping on. Now, man, I mean, the Elam Ending has been in development for over a decade. You wrote about it back in 2007. It's been adopted for a couple years now on TBT, the basketball tournament, which has been airing on ESPN and other platforms. And now it has all come to a head at the forefront in the NBA All-Star Game. When you heard that the NBA wanted to use your ending, your rules that you concocted, what was your initial reaction?
I was really excited. I appreciated that they gave me a heads up in advance of the official announcement and told me that they appreciated my passion for the game, my innovative ideas. They had told me that in their internal discussions with the Players Association that the players really see a lot of merit in this concept of an untimed finish to games. And then when they told me that they wanted to send me as a guest of the NBA to All-Star Weekend in Chicago, I was thrilled for all those reasons. But then instantly I started thinking about, okay, how is this actually going to look and play out? How is the All-Star Game going to end? You know, is it going to be a LeBron James dunk, James Harden three? You know, all these cool possibilities that are out there for the way to end with the swish of a net. So I'm excited to see it on Sunday.
Right, and I would love for you to go in depth on kind of how you concocted this idea because it's pretty awesome. This is from NBA's official release for those that don't know about the All-Star Game. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, the game clock will be turned off and a final target score will be set. The final target score will be determined by taking the leading team's total cumulative score through three quarters and adding 24 points, representing Kobe Bryant's number, RIP. The teams will then play an untimed quarter, and the first team to reach the final target score will win the NBA All-Star Game. So that sounds relatively simple and easy to understand. It might take some time for some basketball fans to get used to. But I'm curious, how do you come up with that cumulative score at the end?
Going back to when I first devised this concept, there were different versions that I laid out. One, when I first devised this back in 2007, I actually preferred a version where you would eliminate the game clock from the entire second half of the game. Now, looking back, I think that's overkill. I don't think that's necessary. Another version, you would eliminate the game clock from the fourth quarter, which is what the NBA is going to do for the All-Star Game. And then a different version, which is actually the version I prefer the most, and this is what TBT, the basketball tournament, implements, is where you would just get rid of the clock for the last few minutes of the game. But then whatever part of the game that you're taking out, you're trying to add back a similar amount there. So, you know, under normal circumstances, I think, and especially considering the higher scoring rate in the All-Star Game, I think the NBA would have used a higher number for the fourth quarter, something like 35 points to try to get, to simulate the length of a full fourth quarter. But given Kobe's passing, this was a really good opportunity to pay tribute to him, and so that's where that's why they're using the plus 24 setting.
Now, from what I understand, you have nothing to do with basketball at Ball State University. This has just been a passion project of yours. You, of course, wrote a book as well, Time's Up for Basketball's Game Clock, initially detailing the Elam Ending, which has now been developed and utilized by TBT and the All-Star Game. What was the one thing that kind of got you to really start thinking about this? Was it the hack-a-shack? Was it the fact that it takes 10 minutes to finish 2 minutes of a basketball game? Was a combination of all the above? What led to you coming up with this idea, or at least saying, you know what, I want to seek out a solution? So
it was a combination of things. And hack-a-shack refers to, very specific kind of fouling. That's a kind of fouling you might even see in the first quarter of a game where you're really targeting, a very, very poor free throw shooter. I was focused more on the late game fouling for the primary purpose of stopping the clock. To me, it just seemed like a fundamental flaw. Here you have a team just blatantly and overtly violating the rule of the game because it's their only recourse to try to come back in the game. And so to me, on its own, that was enough to try to address it. How do you compel teams to just play by the spirit of the rules? But then as I researched it more and more, I realized, because I always had this misconception that, okay, you let teams foul at the end, that gives them a chance to come back. But then through my research, finding that when a team has to resort to that fouling strategy at the end, but they only come back and win the game about 1% of the time, then that was even more eye-opening to me. Like, wait a second, here's a fundamental flaw, and it hardly ever works. It's really not an appealing style of play for anybody. Nobody enjoys that style, and yet it's still the trailing team's best option. So how, and again, it's all because they are so desperate to stop the clock that they're willing to hand away free points. And so that's when the thought was, well, maybe if you just got rid of the clock at the end of the game, that would address that particular aspect. And not only does it address that, but now it forces the leading team to play more assertively to get to the target score. Now you're going to see higher quality play all the way through the end, because another thing that I've noticed in my research is that, throughout the course of a basketball game, we're used to seeing teams score over 1 point per possession. But when you get into a true buzzer beater situation, that proficiency plummets to about 0.2 points per possession. So it turns the most important possession of a game into a blooper reel. And, again, we see it's very hard to overcome late deficits, even relatively slim deficits. You get a lot of good games and big games that just kind of fade out with a whimper, and you get clock controversies and reviews and all this kind of stuff. So the Elam Ending not only addresses just the fouling aspect, but so many other things that we see late in games.
So how did an administrator, a math teacher, later a professor, go from writing this book, concepting the Elam Ending, to getting the concept's big break and getting it on national television? Yeah,
so you mentioned that, this is not my primary field. Yeah, I'm a lifelong educator. And, as you mentioned, I started out as a math teacher. When I first thought of this, I was just starting out as a high school math teacher, and then along the way, moved into school administration, became a high school athletic director, became a school principal, and now I'm a professor who prepares future principals. And all along the way, this was just kind of like a side project, a side hobby, something that I can honestly say that at some point of the day, I have thought about every single day over those last, 13 years now. But, so when I started this, I was not well connected in the basketball world. I don't have the knowledge of, kind of self-promotion and that sort of thing. So that's probably one of the reasons why it did take 10 plus years for somebody to finally give it a chance. But just persistence and diligence and really, really scrutinizing the idea to make sure that I had to convince myself that the idea was sound and that it was necessary and that it had the potential to be very cool. And all those things along the way, just reaching out to people and different messaging, trying to emphasize different things, and knowing that at some point somebody was going to take a chance on it. And finally, in 2017, TBT did. Knowing that, again, all along, I was speaking on behalf of the concept, and I just knew that once the concept had a chance to speak for itself, that's when it would really take off. And so that's exactly what happened at TBT, that they implemented it the first time, and people are wondering, okay, what are we getting into here? And then they see it, and they're like, okay, this is actually kind of a simple, straightforward, kind of an elegant idea. It's not a gimmick, really. It's an anti-gimmick because, it's all meant to just preserve a natural style of play through the end. So again, once people see it, then they're like, oh, okay, like I get this now. This is pretty straightforward.
Now, I heard a little story that you get some major praise from a future Hall of Famer. From what I understand, Chris Paul, CP3, had a TBT team last year, and he loved the Elam Ending so much, they told David Stern, hey, we got to implement this one day, and here we are a year later, it's being implemented in the All-Star game. What does it mean to get that kind of praise from that kind of player?
Yeah, when he was the one who kind of put the wheels in motion with Commissioner Silver and now to see it come to life, that really means a lot for a few reasons. One is because, again, he has coached a team in TBT. He has seen this. He has had to navigate this format of the Elam Ending and has that firsthand experience. He's not basing this on, he heard about it and, kind of thinks that it sounds like a good idea. No, like he's lived it. He has lived the Elam Ending, and he thinks that it's worth being a proponent of this concept. So that's why it means a lot. The other reason that it means a lot is because of his level of influence. He is the president of the NBA Players Association. He doesn't just get to kind of push his own pet causes. He has to speak on behalf of the players that he represents. So for me, that tells me that if he is pushing this idea, that it's not just because he likes it, but that there are a fair number of NBA players who also support this concept. So that's why it means a lot for him to support it.
Given the never-ending battle for eyeballs with sports, and other than the NFL, which also has lost some viewership here and there, a lot of these sports are competing for attention, and people nowadays have shorter attention spans and everything. Could you see down the road the NBA adopting this, not just for the All-Star game and special games, if they do like a midseason tournament or anything like that, but an actual regular season?
Well, if I had a vote, I would vote for it right now. I'd vote for it yesterday, but I only get so much say. I just have to, keep proposing the merits of the concept and then hope that someone who does have the ability to implement it will take a chance on it. But I absolutely think that there's a chance that it will continue to grow and develop. I mean, already based on TBT's success, we've seen grassroots level leagues and events all throughout the United States. And I even just heard the other day there's a men's league in Egypt, that's implemented it. So again, at that grassroots level, it's growing. Now that it's in the All-Star game at the NBA level, that's huge. And there are so many great testing grounds that, the NBA, if they still want to kind of stress test it a little bit, many other great testing grounds for it, whether that is something like the G League, whether that's something like that midseason tournament that you mentioned, preseason, different FIBA leagues. In the college level, you have postseason tournaments like the NIT where they experiment with a lot of rules, or the CBI or the CIT. So, again, I think it'll continue to grow at those kinds of venues first. And then, again, the dream, like you said, is to see it played at the highest level, the NBA, the WNBA, NCAA Division I, and the Olympics.
If you could implement the rule today with the NBA, what would be the target score?
It's important to I think it's okay to keep the clock around pretty far into the game, because that way that makes it a little more TV friendly, where you're able to have a pretty predictable time range where, I think NBA likes that 2.5 hour window. The longer you keep the game clock around, the more predictable the length of the game's going to be. And with that 24-second shot clock in the NBA, you really don't see teams with the lead really go into a stall offense until, just the very final minutes of the game. So for NBA, I would keep the clock around until the first stoppage under the 3-minute mark of the fourth quarter. Another reason why that's a good transition point is because that happens to be the last media timeout in the NBA. So it makes for just kind of a natural time to transition. So we're going to keep the clock to the 3-minute mark of the fourth quarter, and then I would set the target score equal to 7 points above the leading team score. So you think about 3 minutes, 7 points. If you extrapolate that over the course of a whole game, a 48-minute game, that's about 112 points, and that pretty well matches the scoring rate in the NBA. So I would go 3 minutes of the fourth quarter and use +7 to set the target score.
Good stuff.
But what's great about it is that all these things are written in pencil. We just have to give it a chance and test it out and see if there are any adjustments that need to be made. If it seems like that's not enough points, maybe we need to bump it up to +8 or +9, then you can certainly do that. For TBT, we started out with 4-minute mark and +7. We have since bumped that up to +8 to try to, again, match that amount of time that we're taking out. So, again, it just needs a chance. It just needs to be a chance to be experimented with to find that perfect setting for each league.
Well, I think you picked a great sport to implement a change like that, or help implement a change like that, because, basketball is such a global sport, and now even more, and even just domestically. TBT's had a lot of success. Big Three's had a lot of success. You got all the international leagues. You have FIBA. Of course, the NBA is tinkering with maybe doing a midseason tournament and some other stuff in the preseason. And of course, with the All-Star game and everything. So I think you got a pretty good foundation here, and you definitely have a community of not just basketball players, but I think fans that are willing to try something new.
Yeah, and what I think is really cool about it is, again, because when you read about it or hear about it for the first time, the Elam Ending, it sounds much more complex than it really is. I mean, really, it just comes down to pretty basic arithmetic at the end of the game there. And so, again, I think once people see it, then they realize, okay, now I understand the spirit of this rule. And I get feedback of all types from all different people. One thing I think is really one of the coolest things, though, some of the people who are most outspoken in their support of the Elam Ending are people who would kind of consider themselves old school or purists, people who really just value good fundamental basketball. And that's really what the Elam Ending is meant to capture.
Excellent. Well, Nick, I sincerely appreciate the time. I know you got a very busy All-Star week. Tell us what you'll be up to over the weekend.
Well, I'm definitely going to be in the arena on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night for all the All-Star weekend events. I've also got some different media opportunities, which is really exciting. It's always nice to be able to discuss this concept. I'm really excited that NBA TV is going to have me on Friday afternoon, and again have a chance to discuss the concept. So it's going to be a fun weekend.